It seemed like 2016 was the year of calling 2017 the year of virtual reality. Now we're 6 months into the year, and the discussion around virtual reality seems to be waning as aspects of the hardware and software fail to deliver. At its current state, virtual reality seems rushed, half-baked, and pretty damn cool at times. It also doesn't seem to have lit the world on fire the way many believed it would last year. I've heard a lot of talk about how virtual reality hasn't taken off because it doesn't have a killer app. A game so graceful in its VR implementation that it skyrockets headsets off the shelves and into your parents' living room. Much like Wii Sports did with the Wii and motion controls. But I don't think that game is coming, and I don't think it could be the saving grace of VR. I mean, look at Resident Evil 7, a full-fledged AAA game in VR. While praise was high, it didn't seem to set the world on fire. Well, you might say, Andrew, that game isn't an exclusive, and exclusives sell consoles. Well, the same could be said for the recently launched Farpoint, Sony's VR first-person shooter, which also hasn't seemed to sparked a fire under people and sent them chasing out new units of PSVR. To begin, I think the entire process of setting up virtual reality flies in the face of consumer electronic design in 2017. All three of the major headsets have numerous wires attached to you, your computer, and the cameras needed for room scale. Now yes, I know, this is Gen 1 tech, but it feels too much like that, and that's a problem. I mean, this isn't a Switch headset we're talking about. I mean, come on, Nintendo, what's up with that? Now seriously, look at PlayStation VR, the unit that I owned at one point. The headset requires you to attach a breakout box, run countless wires, and consume all USB ports on the OG model of the PS4. The end result is a hodgepodge of cables that seems half-baked by design. Even Microsoft has pulled away from their planned VR initiative on the upcoming Scorpio due to their focus on AR and VR on PC. In fact, in an interview about that initiative, they stated that they believe console VR has to be a wireless experience. And that's something that cannot be ignored. A wireless experience would lead to a more streamlined and intuitive design for VR that would attract more mainstream consumers because it doesn't seem like a mess of a design. The space needed and the clunky design setup doesn't seem compelling or interesting to mass consumers who have come to expect cleaner designed products. How about we look at Valve's room scale tech? The technology is there. It's nothing short of amazing. But who actually has the space for that? Who wants to set it up, who wants to maintain it, and who wants to make sure that they always have the space for that when making such a large investment? Well, you could say that all the cables and the space needed for VR is such a small factor in why consumers aren't flocking as quickly to VR as we might have expected, and you could be right about that. But it ties into a larger detraction from VR, one that the majority of users I've spoken with have brought up to me. That is, how little they use the system itself. This usually comes down to two reasons. The first being that the commitment of putting on, calibrating, and troubleshooting is too high for most gaming situations. Many of the early adopters I've spoken with have found themselves rarely touching their headset because after a day of work or class, going through the hoops of VR doesn't seem to be the best bargain for their time when the game they'll play is a short and often basic experience. Not to detract from any of the great experiences that are available on VR, but many of them are shorter and often minimal or basic experiences that could be finished in a couple minutes, and that doesn't influence a lot of people to stay with VR for a longer period of time. Let's take a look back on Farpoint, a game that numerous reviews described as fun, but only because it's in VR. This is an argument that gets brought up a lot, and I see both sides of it. On one hand, the fact that I'm playing a game in VR makes it cooler. The immersion offered is unlike anything out there in traditional games. But if at a gameplay level it isn't fun beyond that point of cool immersion, I can't see it retaining my interest for very long. When VR games are competing with the array of traditional games for our time, developers have to utilize VR as a stepping stone towards something grander, not as a crutch, or it will remain a gimmick for its lifetime. VR has to provide quantifiable gameplay implementations that make it more than just a head-tracking monitor on your face that keeps you from looking at your phone. Let us also not forget to mention that virtual reality is expensive, specifically when trying to play games. PSVR, Oculus, and Vive all vary in price, but none of them are cheap by any standards. Couple that with the need for a console or a PC, and the fact that you will need or want more VR games on top of regular games, you're looking at a pretty hefty cost to get into VR at the ground level. With all of that being said, there is no single app or streamlining that can fix this Gen 1 tech, at least not with what has been presented thus far. The games need to be better. Hardware manufacturers also have to find a way to revise the tech to make it easier and less clunky to use. We're already seeing this happen, with Valve and HTC recently announcing a standalone VR headset. No phone, no PC, no console, no wires. While this may not provide the most visually intensive or best gameplay experiences, it's a step in the direction of removing the physical barrier to entry by removing clutter, clunk, and commitment. So where does this leave us? You might think I'm being super negative on VR, but it's only because at its current state, it seems to be struggling to find its footing. But I am excited for what will come next. At the time of publishing, Sony has announced that they have reached over 1 million units sold. That's a pretty decent number that Sony has stated is only lower because of stock shortages, which in turn led to less marketing on their end. However, they've remained adamant that their plan is to move forward with the device, and while we should take them at their word, the biggest indicator of this dedication will be the quality and quantity of VR titles shown at E3 next week. Whether you're an early adopter who's thinking about getting rid of their headset, someone on the fence about getting in general, or a complete denier of VR's viability, you have to think that we are in a cool point in time. Virtual reality is pretty damn cool, if not half-baked, and it has potential to go somewhere. But could it just be a stepping stone on the way to AR? Who knows? I guess only time will tell.